Hello. Thanks for making the time to join us this evening. My name is Michael. I'm the events coordinator and publicist at Annie Bloom's Books. For those of you who aren't familiar with the store, we're located in Portland, Oregon, in the heart of Multnomah Village. We've been around for 42 years now, and we are still going strong. Our store is now open to in-store browsing, as Will discovered earlier today, with masks still required. We are open on weekdays from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and weekends from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Our website is always open. You can shop day and night at annieblooms.com. We offer curbside pickup, in-store pickup, local delivery within 3 miles of the store, and a couple of different shipping options. We've got a couple weeks off before we have a couple of events in July. On Monday, July 12th at 6 p.m., Dana Spiotta will be reading from her new novel, Wayward. She's the author of Eat the Document. She'll be in conversation with Christine Schutt. Oh, admit another person here. And Christine Schutt is the author of Pure Hollywood and Other Stories. The next day, on July 13th at 7 p.m., that's Tuesday, Kelly Williams Brown, who's the author of Adulting, will be reading from her new book, Easy Crafts for the Insane, a mostly funny memoir of mental illness and making things. I love that title. Tonight, we are delighted to have Oregon author William Ritter reading from his brand new novel, The Oddmire Book 3, Deepest Darkest. Let me tell you about that book. It's the third adventure in the beloved fantasy series full of folklore and mayhem from the creator of Jacoby. Brothers Cole and Tin, one human, one goblin changeling, are determined to solve a mystery almost as old as they are. What happened to their long missing father? Joseph Burton vanished without a trace, leaving the baby boy's mother to raise them alone. Let's admit someone else. To raise them alone. Some say he abandoned his family, others that he met foul play, looking for a way to get rid of the changeling imposter. Cole is determined to finally push through the rumors and learn his father's fate. With the help of their friends, Evie, expert on the creatures of the wild wood, and Fable, the indomitable half-human, half-fairy, Tin and Cole set out on a dangerous quest to the deepest, most deadly limits of the wild wood. Meanwhile, a shudder runs through the forest. Increasingly powerful earthquakes shake the land. Sinkholes form, and the Spriggans, trolls, and other creatures along their path speak of an ancient evil on the rise. William Ritter is an Oregon author and educator. He is a proud father of the two bravest boys in the wild wood and husband to the indomitable Queen of the Deep Dark. The Oddmire is Ritter's first series for middle grade readers. He is also the author of the New York Times bestselling award-winning Jacoby series for young adult readers. You can visit him online at rwillritter.wordpress.com and find him on Twitter at willothewords. William Ritter.
Hello, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be putting this one out. This has been a bizarre year. I'm not entirely used to running the readings in this format. I'm used to teaching. I teach high school as well, and that's a very different world. So I've picked out just a few excerpts that I'm looking forward to sharing with you, just sort of examples of things coming from this one. If you are interested in starting the series and haven't yet, I am going to spoil a few things from the first series. I looked through very carefully to see if I could possibly do any kind of a reading that wouldn't do that, and it's really not happening. There's just far too much of the books are built off of each other. So this is book 3 of the Oddmire series, and I'm thrilled to say that Annie Blooms has copies of the first 2 signed if anyone's interested, as well as, of course, this one, which is out now today. So just a little bit about the series. It is mostly about Cole and Tin, who are brothers inspired very much by my own boys. And so when I first started writing the story, a lot of it was about sort of the messages that I wanted them to get, especially as one of them is biological and one of them is adoptive. And so there were lots of messages about how family sort of knits together and how family is forever and always, even though it's weird and strange and it doesn't have to look any one way. So I was thrilled to be able to sort of put into words a fantasy version of that, with one child who was a goblin changeling and one child who was human. And then bit by bit, as the story sort of evolved, other themes started making their way into it. So before writing this one, which as we just heard is largely about these boys finally going to look for their long lost father, my father wound up having a bit of a medical emergency, and he wound up having a stroke that really hit him hard. And he's doing well now. He's in great shape. I just chatted with him just the other day and played Dungeons and Dragons with him a bit by phone. But there was a brief period where I was really scared and nervous, and I hopped into a car and zoomed up toward Washington because I was worried that this might be the end, and that I was so afraid that this might be my daddy struggling with his sort of a fight for life. And on the way up, my tears were running, and I was really worried and nervous and just feeling completely useless. I have three older sisters, one of whom is joining us here today, and I was feeling like the least useful of our entire family. I've got one who is trained as sort of an emergency responder to things, works with firefighters, and one who's worked in hospitals and knows how, is a trained nurse, a registered nurse, and knows how to handle people with medical emergencies, and another who is trained to work with people's minds, or a trained psychologist. And I make up stories about fantasy creatures, and I felt the least prepared to handle somebody having a real emergency. And so on the way up, I started listening to a podcast about three brothers who play Dungeons and Dragons with their dad. It's called The Adventure Zone. And it's just three complete goobers who just have a ridiculous adventure, and they make up silly spells and swear and have a good time. But as I was making my way up and kind of listening to this in order to distract me from the emotions, I started sort of feeling the feelings of what it means to connect with your dad across the airwaves. And so after he made his recovery, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons with my dad as a way of connecting and getting a chance to both connect with him, because I'd sort of missed that and fallen away for a little bit just because of distance, and also to sort of remind him that he is super intelligent and strong. He's a brilliant man himself, and so he gets to solve my diabolical traps. And I found myself just kind of feeling healed in the process. That I feel like it does more for me than it does for him. But I was in the middle of doing that. I was in the middle of making up Dungeons and Dragons games for my dad when I finished writing Deepest Darkest. And so this one is dedicated to him. This one is for my father, Russ. And I am thrilled that I get to see him at the end of the week and deliver a copy myself. So that's where this one's coming from. A lot of the themes then resonate with that. And I'll go ahead and read some pieces of this to you. So I had the pleasure of attending an event ages ago with another author named Jonathan Auksher. Wrote Peter Nimble and a bunch of really fantastic stuff. And he mentioned that he loves to think about who's the most vulnerable in a scene. So if he's deciding about perspective, he'll try and think who's the most worried, who's the most scared, who's got the most to lose, and focusing on that person makes it a more compelling story. And so there were a lot of those kinds of characters in my book. Lots of reasons that people feel vulnerable. We have various different characters who are worried about being left behind, and characters who don't know who they are and sort of finding themselves, and characters who feel like outsiders. And one of the characters who surprised me as I got started writing was a character that we haven't seen since the first book. Spoiler alerts now for anyone. But in the first book, we have a villain called simply The Thing, who seems the furthest from vulnerable. A character who is super intense and scary and sort of seems almost all-powerful. But by the end of the first book, turns out to sort of his undoing is love. His undoing is because he hasn't felt kindness and care, and when someone finally extends it to him, she sort of falls to pieces. And so that character is largely absent during book 2, and then the third book picks up with him. So I'll read for you the prologue. Earlier. The forest whipped past the Thing in a blur. It was feeling things it had not felt in a very long time, and some it had never felt at all. The pain, the cold, the fear, these were all too familiar. But nestled beside them now was something else, an exquisite ache. The Thing could scarcely breathe. It had failed. It had tried to consume a changeling boy, and it had failed. And then everything had come crashing down. The boy's words echoed in its skull. Nobody ever came for you, did they? That isn't fair. The Thing burrowed its face into the soft earth, but that voice was everywhere. His hand, gentle and warm, had scooped it up, held it close. The boy's eyes had looked down at it with such pity. I'm sorry that you suffered, the boy had said. You didn't deserve that. You didn't deserve to be turned into this. The thing dug more deeply now. It roared a furious roar to drown out the words and the feelings, but all that escaped into the cold night was a piteous wail, little more than the squeaking of a mouse. It was all too much. It clutched at shadows, trying desperately to pull the darkness around itself as it once had, to create for itself an armor of icy midnight. The shadows melted through its fingers like smoke. Something had changed. Not in the shadows, but within the thing itself, and it couldn't put itself back the way it was. The thing did not want to be different. It burrowed deeper. The thing could still feel the warmth of the child's hands, clinging to it like tar. It had felt something else, too, while it was being held. It had felt not anger, not hate. The memory burned like acid in the pit of its stomach. Deeper and deeper it tunneled. The thing had felt love. But how? How could the boy treat it that way after everything it had done, had tried to do, had promised to do? The boy had seen the thing at its worst, and he had not given up on it. He had greeted its sharpest barbs with tenderness. Nobody had ever come for the thing. The boy was right about that. The boy's family had come for him, and his friends, and even the forest folk, but nobody had ever come for the thing, not ever, except for the boy. The boy had come for the thing. He had knelt down and reached out for the thing, held it, given it a chance. If, against every rational instinct, the boy could love a wretched creature such as it, then maybe the thing was capable of being loved after all. All at once, the ground beneath the thing's fingers crumbled away, and it nearly dropped into a gaping underground cavern. The thing caught itself and breathed in deeply. There were bodies moving below it in the dark. The thing could sense them. It could also sense hopelessness and despair. The thing closed its eyes and tasted currents of misery in the clammy air. Yes, this was familiar. This was a flavor the thing knew. It drank deeply. Around it, the darkness slowly thickened and coalesced once more. Yes, this was right. Nothing had changed. The thing could do great, terrible things down here. So that's our prologue, getting started in there. So I enjoyed diving a little bit deeper into the thing in this one. Thank you very much. I have the pleasure of working with students, and one of the things that I see regularly is kids who start to think of themselves as whatever the worst things they've had levied against themselves. And so I like sort of finding that humanity even in the worst. And some of my favorite students are the ones who gave me the most trouble, and I absolutely adore them, and they wind up being the most loving deep down underneath when you get a chance to crack through certain shells. I'm going to read a couple of other sections here along the way. So the next section I'm going to get to, I'll read you from chapter 5, just jumping forward a little bit. So in this book, one of the biggest looming fears early on in the series was the fear of being different. And the whole first book is all about not knowing which of these two boys are a goblin and which is human. And in the end of that one, again, spoiler alert, we learn that Tin is actually the goblin changeling, and it's hard, and he's afraid that he's going to be left behind by his family. He's afraid that he's not going to belong. And in fact, as it turns out, he has a family who loves him, and he has friends who will be there for him, and he finds out that being different isn't actually the worst thing. Being different is okay. And in fact, over time, paradoxically, it's Cole who winds up feeling a little left behind as Tin begins sort of exploring his newfound family, that there's an extended family that he didn't know that he had before. And so this book focuses a little more on a slightly more nuanced fear, the fear that you can be yourself and be comfortable with who you are, and that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone else around you will be. That there are still sometimes people who don't love you for who you are, and that's hard. And so in this one, Tin is really nervous about some of the people who might not be there for him, and Cole is nervous about sort of being left behind. And so this one picks up during one of the moments when Tin is away from Cole. In the first book, they were almost never separated. In this one, he's spending time more often with the goblins. So this scene picks up in the goblin horde with Cole, who is sort of surrogate father to Tin, giving him lessons. Cole eyed Tin. All right, out with it. With what? You couldn't have focused on your gobblish composition earlier either. You kept mixing up your dashes and your hashes, and you didn't even touch your broth during lunch, and I put extra flowers and moss in it for you today. You also put a whole squirrel in it. You're a growing boy. Growing boys need protein if and they don't want to be growing numpties who make all sorts of mistakes because their heads is miles away. Tin sighed and slumped down on the table with his head in his now featherless arms. All right, lad, out with it. What's on your nog? Tin took a deep breath. Cole, I guess. Your brother? What's he done now? Nothing. It's just... Tin's stomach felt twisted. Have you talked to him about your tourist yet? Cole asked. The tourist base was a goblin coming-of-age ritual that Cole had brought up a few lessons ago. It was a dangerous journey every goblin had to take before they could become an adult, and they had to take it alone. Tin shook his head. I've tried bringing that up a couple of times. There's not an easy way to tell your family that you're thinking of going on a huge trip without them for months, especially when that trip is literally a death journey. Ugh, I should never have told you the translation. A tourist is not about dying. It's about putting to rest the part of you that is already past, letting go of the corpse of the old you so that the new you can stand tall on his own 2 feet. Technically, Gol the blacksmith came back with just the 1 foot to stand on, but not every tourist is as exciting as Gol's. Besides, he made himself a shiny new one in no time. He sat down across from Tin. Every goblin takes a tourist, lad, when the time is right and the goblin is ready. I'll find the right time, said Tin, but that's not what's bothering me. He slouched back against the worn wood of the chair. We've been looking for our dad together, our human dad, Cole's dad. Cole nodded. No luck, then? Tin shook his head. No, we haven't found a single real clue. Nobody has. Not for years. We might never. Cole thinks he found one, but it's just a sort of a rock. The whole thing feels weird anyway. Cole raised an eyebrow in question. It feels weird looking for somebody who ran away because of what you are. I'm finally getting to enjoy being me. Ah. Cole winced and nodded again. So why do you keep looking? It's really important to Cole. It's all he talks about. He's convinced that our dad's out there somewhere, and if he is, well, then he owes Cole some answers. He owes both of us some answers. And what if they're not the answers you want to hear? Tin shook his head. Cole deserves to know, one way or another. He glanced down, and his voice became a mumble. I deserve to know. Cole's brow furrowed. He had blotchy green skin, flopping leathery ears, and teeth like broken glass, but every once in a while he looked at Tin like that. The goblin's face reminded Tin of his mother. It was the eyes, all full of concern. Not that Tin would ever tell his mother that. Cole's eyes lowered as he spoke. Just be careful, lad. Sometimes, when you dig up the past, you find more bones than you buried. I'll stop that one there. So I do love getting to explore Cole and the goblins as well. There's a lot of myself in Cole, and especially the ways that he often is bumbling and wants to do the right things, but doesn't necessarily know exactly what that is. So in this one, they're exploring sort of being together on an adventure, of course, but starting to grow apart more and more. In the first book, they were nearly identical. They had almost the exact same reactions to things, even though they had different personalities. But in this book, they're beginning more and more to grow apart. And so one of the other tropes that I tried to make sure to avoid was having them be too far apart. And so I wanted to avoid having sort of the adults be uninvolved, for example. I wanted to make sure that this was a story about kids having a wild adventure, but I didn't like the conveniently killing off the parents, or conveniently having parents be completely ignorant of what the kids do, or not caring, or being even sort of mean parents who kick them out of the house. Because as much as those can be fun stories, as a parent, I felt like that maybe sends the wrong message. That sometimes it's good to tell your parents the truth and let them in on your adventures. So the next section that I'm going to read to you jumps in on the boys having finally admitted some of their shenanigans to their mother. I especially love writing Annie. Annie is every inch the parent. She is long-suffering and exhausted in much the way that I can feel deep down in my bones as a parent. But she would still, even at her most exhausted, would go to hell and back to protect her children. And so in this section, they've finally admitted that they've been trying to find their father. And admitted, in fact, that they've even gone out with, of all people, old Jim, who is usually such a crotchety old man that they would never spend time with him. But they've just gotten back from a misadventure with Jim and admitted it to their mother at last. And rather than responding to the truth by getting mad at them and telling them that they're forbidden to go anywhere, she knows them well enough to know that that will only backfire. So she's agreed to go with them instead. So if they're going to get in trouble, she'd rather get in trouble with them rather than having them be on their own. So in this section, they're preparing, and this chapter was sort of exemplifying the sort of togetherness and connection that I wanted this book to have. The mines, said Cole. It's got to be the mines. It was quiet for a moment as each of them waited for one of the others to raise a counterpoint against it. That boarded up shaft. It looked like it went down a really long way, said Tin. Cole nodded. It's probably how he got down there. Annie pursed her lips. She used to be a miner's wife. She knew only too well about coal dust and toxic fumes and cave-ins, all very good reasons to stay out of condemned shafts, especially if you enjoyed things like breathing and having a heartbeat. She closed her eyes. Not used to be. She was a miner's wife. He was still down there. He was still alive. The mine it is, she said. I'll skip forward just a bit. Annie plucked a stubby pencil from behind her ears. Let's see, 2 pickaxes, 2 coils of rope. Cole picked up some rope. Oof, this is heavy. How long is it, 100 feet? He slid his head into the coil so that it hung over his shoulder and across his chest like a bulky sash. How do I look? Like you're ready for anything, said Tin, as long as the thing you need to be ready for is having rope. 2 safety lanterns, Annie continued, 6 candles, waterproof matches. She pointed to each of the items in turn as she ticked them off her list. Ooh, trail mix, said Tin. Think fast. He tossed a bag to Cole. Is it the kind with the chocolate chips? Said Cole, catching it and peeking inside. Put it down. Annie marked the trail mix off her list. 3 bags of travel provisions, 1 tin with 6 sandwiches, and 1 large package of beef jerky. Is that enough sandwiches? Said Tin. Maybe we should make more sandwiches. It's plenty of sandwiches. We're not planning on staying underground forever. Can I have a piece of jerky before we go? Said Cole. No, said Annie. Those are for the trip. A sharp knock pulled all of their eyes to the door. Annie put down the list and crossed to the front of the house. Tin and Cole peeked around her as she opened the door. Annie straightened. Hi, it's me, said old Jim. He shuffled his feet awkwardly on the front step, Evie at his side. Mr. Warner, Annie crossed her arms. I see you do remember how to talk to your fellow adults after all. Old Jim winced. I take it the boys let you know my part in yesterday's business. You mean the part where you took my children, with neither my knowledge nor my permission, and put them in harm's way 100 miles from where I could do anything to help them? 40 miles, mumbled old Jim. Maybe 45, tops. Annie raised an eyebrow. Say the thing you practiced. Evie nudged her great-uncle's leg. Old Jim cleared his throat. I owe you an apology, he grunted. Should have told you first. That's on me. You shouldn't have gone at all, said Annie. Jim rubbed the back of his neck. I know, but nope, you're right. It was downright irresponsible to take them kids marching into something dangerous that I didn't fully understand myself. Annie's steely gaze faltered for a moment. That's right, she said. Completely irresponsible. What's that for? Said Evie, pointing at the rope wrapped around Cole's chest. It's for climbing, Cole said, and probably for other rope-related stuff. You never know. Jim looked at the rope. He looked at Annie. His eyes narrowed. "Foolhardy, even," he said, more slowly. Annie swallowed. "Indeed." Over her shoulder, the table of supplies was just visible. For several long seconds, the adults locked eyes. "What's happening?" Evie whispered, looking from one of them to the other. "Whatever it is, we're in," said old Jim. "What? No!" Annie began to protest, but old Jim stepped past her into the house before she could argue. Evie followed in his wake. "So, what's the plan?" "Really, Jim," Annie tried, but he was already crossing into the kitchen to survey the supplies. "We're going to Echo Point," said Cole, following him through the doorway. "We're going to try to find a way down through the old tunnels." "Cool!" Annie glared at him. Cole shrugged. Old Jim's head bobbed in approval. "Good call. Folks talk about hearing things in those tunnels all the time. They gotta connect to something down there. We bringing anything to protect ourselves?" "Jim, seriously," Annie said. "Mom bought us a couple of pickaxes," said Tin, "and some trail mix." "Is it the kind with the chocolate chips?" asked Evie. Annie threw up her arms in exasperation. "Of course, it's the kind with the chocolate chips!" she yelled, quite a little bit louder than she had intended to. The room quieted for a moment as Annie leaned heavily on the countertop with both hands and took several steadying breaths. "Look, I appreciate the offer, but Joseph is my family," she said. "I can't ask you to come with us." Old Jim put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No one asked for your help before you jumped in the bucket brigade when the stationery store caught fire, did they? They didn't need to. Your boys didn't need to be asked for help for when they pulled my sorry butt out of the line of fire during that battle a few months back either. You and yours might stir up more than your fair share of trouble, but you never hesitate to stick your necks out for me and mine, so I'm not waiting to be asked. You fixing to finally find Joseph? We're in. End of discussion. Ain't that right, Evelyn?" Evie grinned. Annie's shoulders sagged. "Fine," she sighed. "You're in." The twins grinned. Before anyone could add anything, another sharp knock rattled the door. "Who now?" Annie made her way to the front door again. Fable was there, beaming merrily. "Hi, Annie Burton." On the stoop behind her stood Reyna, the indomitable queen of the deep dark. "Fable? Reyna?" said Annie. "Is everything all right?" "My daughter informs me that you intend to embark on a perilous journey to fathomless subterranean depths beneath my wild wood," Reyna said. Her voice was cool as the autumn breeze. "Well," Annie hesitated, "I wouldn't phrase it quite like that." "We are coming with you." "Excuse me?" "I do not feel that I need to repeat myself," said the Queen. She stepped past Annie into the now increasingly crowded house. "We are ready to depart when you are." Fable smiled broadly as she followed her mother inside. Annie blinked. "I think," Tin said softly from beside her, "we are going to need some more sandwiches." That's the end of that chapter. So that kicks off our giant adventure as they make their way into the deepest and darkest. I'll read just one last section, and then if you have any questions for me, or we'll sort of open things up to just sort of casual discussion, I'll shift over to that in a moment. But I'll read this last section from In the Depths, deep down underground. We get a moment with Fable and the rest of the group have been separated, and so Fable is finding her way back to her mother in this last section. I'll read. "Coming!" Fable peered down the corridor. Yes, she could just make out her mother's silhouette in the darkness ahead. Her fire must have gone out again already. Her mother's magic was not working right down here. Fable hurried to catch up. "There was something skittery on the rocks back there," she said as she neared. "It looked sort of like a possum with huge eyes, but then it—" Fable's voice trailed off. Something was wrong. Her mother's cloak was wrapped too tightly around her shoulders. It hugged her frame more like a fitted dress than a furry bearskin, making her look too slender and too tall. "Mama?" Her mother turned to face her. No, she didn't. Fable's heart pounded, and the flame at her fingertips flared as the realization slammed into her. This was not her mother. The woman's complexion was so pale it bled into the gray of the cave around her. She had jet black hair pulled back tightly on her head, and her high-collared dress was like velvety ash. She regarded Fable with an icy stare. The earth moved around the woman's feet, and a dozen dark, glossy eyes caught the firelight, more of these skittering rock creatures. Possum was a good comparison, except that their faces were flatter, more like primates, and their mouths were too big. Bristly fur melted into stones as the creatures scurried over one another, surrounding the woman's feet. The face Fable had seen poking out of the rocks back in the tunnel had seemed almost cute, like an ugly ferret or a baby gremlin. Now that she could see them out in the open, she wasn't sure cute was the right word for whatever these were. One of them hissed, bearing too many teeth in its wide mouth, and then it clambered up the front of the woman's skirt. The woman reached down without taking her eyes off of Fable and scooped up the feral creature in one arm like a house cat. She stroked its coarse fur with her other hand while it continued to bare its teeth at Fable. "Hello, little girl," said the woman. Something about the way that she said the words "little girl" made the hair on Fable's neck stand on end. "You seem to have taken a bad turn." "Don't hurt me," said Fable. "Was that a command?" The woman turned to the creature on her arm as if the wiry rodent could confirm her suspicions. It squeaked. "Yes, I do believe the beastly thing just issued a command," said the woman. "To me." She turned back to Fable. "The thing about the commands," she said coldly, "is that when I am given them I have this terrible urge to do the opposite." She let her final warning hang in the air, its echo hissing in Fable's ears. "My mom is the queen of the deep dark," said Fable, trying to sound confident. The light in front of her was flickering, thrumming weakly with each beat of her pounding heart. "Everybody's heard of her." "Is she really?" The woman's expression did not change, but she leaned in so close that Fable could feel the stranger's breath on her cheek. "Well then, I shall endeavor to remind myself to curtsy when we meet." She did not raise her voice in the slightest, but the echo of her words still whispered back and forth around them in the cavern. The woman stood up straight, not taking her eyes from Fable. "You have ventured into my domain, deeper and darker than any lands over which your royal mother might claim dominion. Would you continue to delve? Do you seek the deepest, the darkest?" Fable swallowed. "Be careful, child." The woman's voice was venom, and her gaze bored into Fable like a knife tip. "Or you might be unfortunate enough to find precisely what you seek." And I'll stop that one there. So that's The Deepest Darkest, which is available, of course, through Annie Bloom's books if you'd like a signed copy. And I'm looking forward to sending that out into the world as the third and for now final installment of that trilogy. So thank you again, everybody, for joining in. I appreciate seeing some friendly faces. I have so many fun, exciting things happening that I would love to get a chance to talk about, but I would love to answer some questions if you'd like to either type in chat or unmute, and I will lean on some help getting some questions brought in to me in order to sort of continue the conversation.
Yeah, we got one from Patricia Sellinger here. "Your narration is wonderful, I agree, and engaging. Did you consider narrating the audiobooks yourself?"
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Patricia. I love doing the voices. I have my mother to thank for that. She required it when I was reading aloud to her as a kid. But I am blessed to have some wonderful audiobook narrators for both of my series. And so as much as I enjoy the readings that I get to do like this live, I leave that to the professionals. I enjoy sort of hearing the voices that they bring to life in much more subtle ways, I think, than some of the ones that I'm able to do. But thank you very much.
Is there just one narrator for each audiobook? Do they do multiple voices like you do, or do they have a bunch of them? Or
Yeah, no, there's been, for each of my series, there's been just one reader. And in fact, I'll check myself to make sure I get names right. But for the Jacoby series, we had just the few readers that were sort of up in the runnings to be chosen. Wound up being very lucky with it. We got one who was a native British woman, which I definitely could not have done justice to reading through an entire series. So I was very fortunate about that. The Oddmire is a little bit closer to sort of my wheel well, but I'm going to confirm here the narrator on this one is Jonathan Todd Ross, who's a phenomenal narrator. He's done a number of really fantastic YA books. And so having him working on all of these ones all the way through, I think is going to give it a nice sort of continuity all the way to the end.
Cool. Teresa Jansen wants to know, what's been your favorite part of the writing process for the series? Did you have the story mapped out, or was it more of a figure it out as we go sort of thing?
I'm going to scooch a little bit. I realize I'm getting some sun directly in my eyes. I'm really glad that this one is happening today and not, say, Saturday or so when it's meant to be 108 where I am right now. I am. Oh, hi, Mira. It's Mira coming in with the wrong name there. I like that with this series more so than with Jacoby. I did have very thorough outlines, so I plotted things very carefully. But having done that with every single one of those books, once I've given myself those steps and I've got sort of the flags planted all the way up the mountain, I've been able to ignore that completely and wander to the side more and more often. So, for instance, Fable is one of my absolute favorite characters to write. In book 2, she sort of takes center stage. It's more about her in The Unready Queen. And she was not even in the original outline that I got approved by my publisher. She evolved and became such an important part of the story, and I can't imagine it without her now. She's such a heart to the story. But things like that, just sort of following what winds up jumping out as being important elements. And in writing Deepest Darkest, for instance, I knew certain things about each of the sort of the 4 main kid characters, emotional arcs that I wanted them to hit and things that I wanted them to delve into. But for instance, that prologue talking about sort of the emotional arc of the Thing I had not planned originally. It was not a part of my outline that I'd come up with at first. And bit by bit, as I began writing more and more, the Thing wanted more screen time. It wanted a chance to come out more. It wanted a chance to sort of evolve. So I really love letting the story do what it wants to do, because often I'm not as smart as the words are, and so they kind of play their own game as I'm just kind of there refereeing. And I wind up with a much healthier story in the end than I would have if I had just stuck faithfully to the outline that I came up with. So that, yeah, I think that having that flexibility is nice. I'm really enjoying just being willing to play and do what feels right for the book.
Cool. Let's see. Philip Clark, Zeph, my son, wants to know if there will be more Oddmire books.
For the time being, this one's going to cap things off. There are a few sort of big loose ends right at the very, very end. I don't know if the next books to follow will be an Oddmire book per se, or merely have some of the same characters but in different situations. So for the time being, this one wraps up some of the sort of the biggest, longest running loose ends and provides sort of a nice closure to this story in much the same way that the end of Jacoby. I had 4 books in the Jacoby series, and I would love to return to those characters. I'd love to see sort of more adventures in the New Fiddlehem world someday. Maybe now that I've wrapped Oddmire, we might see more of them. But it was a nice sort of arc for those characters to end there, and this felt like the right place to kind of end this one for these characters, for this specific arc. But having said that, I couldn't possibly completely walk away from these characters, so I would love to visit Tin and Cole and Fable and Evie again.
All right. Any other questions to type in there? You're also welcome to just jump on if you're feeling up to it and ask a question in person. Or an observation. It doesn't have to be a question.
I'll just kind of going off the cuff as we wait. If anybody does have a question, feel free to jot that in. I've been doing more and more of these kinds of events. I used to get a chance to zip around to bookstores, and I've been missing that, being live and in person. But bouncing around doing more and more different sort of kinds of virtual events lately. And it brings a whole kind of different world. I've been able to visit with students in the middle of classes, for instance, and get to sort of zoom in with them as they're doing this strange comprehensive distance learning thing.
Oh, that's really cool.
And I'm enjoying the new shift. I'm enjoying that it's a change from what I'm used to, but in some good ways. And so, for instance, I've been able to have readers jump in and talk about how they're really concerned about this character and what's going to happen in the next book, and asking questions about things, continuity things. If this was true in the first book, then how can this be true in the second book? It's really sharp questions that I was really lucky to have already come up. I had answers to. It was part of the story itself. So it's been fun sort of getting that kind of deep dive in ways that normally I wouldn't have been able to get out to as many different places as I have. So that's been fun. But it does, of course,
Cool.
come with the difference of not being live anymore. So I'm looking forward to being back to real life and normal sometime soon.
Hopefully we'll be able to keep elements of both going ahead
Yes.
into the future. You'd be able to do something like that where you can reach kids that you wouldn't otherwise be able to, but
Yeah.
also go back into a bookstore.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I like that we've got recording happening here, so you can share things out to your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a question. Patricia, what types of books do/did you enjoy reading to your boys?
Oh, great question. Also, we love doing read alouds. The most recent we just wrapped up. I brought Avengers Assembly: The Sinister Substitute with me. Only hitting this on there by Preeti Chibber. Fantastic series for these ones. The second in the series, and it's about a couple of sort of main characters from the Marvel worlds. We've got Miss Marvel and Squirrel Girl and Spider-Man, the Miles Morales version, all sort of in a school together and having zany adventures. And it's sort of like the Dav Pilkey's kind of stuff, where you get lots of text pages and then also illustrated pages and kind of a nice mix in between. So it's super easy reading, but just really fun to dive into the characters. And as a Marvel nerd, I adore that clearly Preeti is a massive nerd herself, because it's loaded with these little subtle references to X-Men and Marvel characters from all over the place. And so sometimes my youngest reads this one to me, and sometimes I read it to him. And we came planning on reading this throughout the week. I'm currently house sitting at the moment, so I'm in my sister's home, and we were planning on reading this sort of a couple chapters at a time, and we were just starting the book, and we wound up reading it all in a night because it was too good. So that was a fun one that we got through. A few of my other favorites, things that I've enjoyed recently, Odd and the Frost Giants is one, if you like, again, sort of reading with the voices. Odd and the Frost Giants by Neil Gaiman is one that's so easy to just dive in. It's got so many different sort of unique voices to it. You get, a Thor and an Odin and a Loki kind of characters, as well as this sort of very methodical Odd, the main character. And so very easy to kind of play with, having lots of fun voices throughout the reading in that one. And so you just lots of books that make it fun and easy to engage and read together. Going back to our earlier reading, we cruised through the whole series of the How to Train Your Dragon books, which are very, very different than the films, when they were a little bit younger, and those ones are fun as well. It's a lot of sort of fart and poop jokes and kinds of things that little kids giggle at, and those ones were a blast to read as well. So lots of good fun ones to get in there. Most recently, though, I'm picking up more graphic novels for the boys also. They're enjoying those ones as well. And I love a good graphic novel. I'm a comic book nerd myself. In fact, when I was at Annie Bloom's, I picked up just recently, Justin Reynolds has a new Miles Morales comic out, so I grabbed a copy of that from you. So that's my next read with the kiddo is a comic book by Justin Reynolds. I forget the subtitle on it, but it's Miles Morales, brand new.
Oh yeah, so I can find that one.
You get the links right there. Nice. Order it directly from Annie Bloom's books today.
Did you say it was the Spider-Man one, the Miles Morales?
Yeah, Miles Morales, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Justin Reynolds.
Yeah,
He's the second Jay Reynolds to pick up the Miles Morales writing streak. Jason Reynolds had a fantastic YA novel. I enjoyed that one with some of my students, actually. Some of my students really responded to that one.
That's that one there.
I'm constantly pushing books, but I would be happy to just chat about different sort of fun books that are out there in the world right now. I'm constantly encouraging them with my students and picking up new books to have in my classroom as well. And in fact, it was we just celebrated Juneteenth, or observed Juneteenth, I should say. And one of my favorite ways to do that is just buying books by Black authors. I think it's there's not a whole lot that I, as a white man, can be doing correctly in order to sort of observe that kind of a holiday. But I can absolutely put my money where my mouth is and get some really good books out of the bargain. So I picked up my most recent one was You Should See Me in a Crown by, I want to say Leah Johnson, but I'm not 1000%. And I've heard nothing but good things about You Should See Me in a Crown. You'll have to confirm if that's
looking it up
or something else.
Yeah.
But I've heard nothing but good things about that one, so I'm excited about that. And as we're wrapping up Pride Month, also I've been reading Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, which is glorious. I really enjoyed that one. If any of you are, as you're here for my book. If any of you are fantasy fans, that one's a really fun one, sort of set in a cemetery with people who can sort of see the dead and help usher them on to their next life and the adventure they have with somebody who's not ready to move on because of various reasons and people dying left and right. And so really fun story, Cemetery Boys. And the lead in that one is a trans male character. And so it's a really fun, authentic voice story from a trans male author. And I think we need a lot more of that in schools. I've got a lot of students this year who, thanks, I think, in part to this strange school from home period, felt a little more comfortable being themselves and living their truth. So I'm excited to see a little more literature getting out on the shelves for those kids who are still having trouble doing that.
Nice. We got a whole library going there.
For days. It's a fun one. It's super fun.
And of course, you can also buy Will's books at the event link right there.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, yeah. And I got a chance to zip in. So we've got signed copies of the paperback of the first two, and then of course we only have the hardcover, but Deepest, Darkest as well. Lots of signed copies there if you'd like to pick one up for yourself. Hitting 45 here. I think this is we're running pretty good. If there are any last questions, I'd love to answer any last things. But otherwise, I think I'll send you all off to enjoy your evenings and hopefully enjoy some air conditioning wherever it is that you are. Last chance questions coming in.
Satisfaction. Oh, here we go. Classic question, but advice to writers?
Advice to writers, sure. Yeah, I've been teaching creative writing classes, and it's a lot of fun to get a chance to work with kids who are just absolutely brilliant and don't necessarily realize it along the way. So the biggest piece of advice that I give kids when they're starting to sort of stare at that blank page is write garbage, edit gold. Because if you stare at one chapter for a million years and never do anything to it, then that's all you have. And if you write something that's not good and you get it out and you get the bad version out of your head, then A, sometimes you find it's not as bad as you thought it was. There's actually some really good gems in there. And B, you can get a chance to edit it. And that makes it into something great. And I would love to credit the author who said this originally, but I don't recall. There was an author that I bumped into at an event who referred to that as filling up the box with sand to make sandcastles later. So when you're preparing to write a novel or whatever it is, the first draft is just the sand. I've used the other analogy of it's the clay that you bring to the table before you mold it. So it's not a thing yet. It's okay that it's a mess. It's okay that it's not good. You've got all the bits there. And the fun part is actually making the castle. The fun part is sculpting it. The fun part is making it into a thing afterwards. And that sort of analogy really helped me feel better also about not thinking of editing as finding what's wrong with my terrible garbage work, but instead feeling good about this process of bringing out the best of it and finding the things that are good in it. So yeah, write your garbage drafts. Let them be garbage. Let them be wonderful garbage, and that's a good thing, and that's okay. As Oscar the Grouch tells us, it's garbage can, not garbage can't. So enjoy that process instead of fearing it. So yeah, write garbage, edit gold.
Good advice.
Thank y'all.
Patricia asks, did you write or draw as a child? Was the fantasy always there?
Yeah, absolutely. I was sort of constantly writing and doodling pictures and running to show it to my siblings and my parents. I actually, again, if I was in my own room, I'd pull off. I have from third grade. I have the construction paper books of Ninja Turtles and Batman Meets the Prince with their laminated covers that my teacher bound with that little weird spiral binding that teachers could do. I don't know, it was a huge thing in the 90s. I don't know if they're still doing it. So I've still got those fully illustrated pictures. I was very lucky that I had very supportive parents, of course, as well along the way. My mother and father were very encouraging as I continued to create those kinds of things. And so the idea that I can keep doing that, and of course the illustrations on these ones are mine as well. I'm very lucky to be able to get the chance to be illustrating and writing these as well. I didn't intend to. That was never the plan for the series, actually. When I got started on this, the thought was I would do maybe just the sort of the interior art. I'm flipping to grab one of those. We'll get here's our kobold hiding in the dark there. But I was planning on just doing sort of interior art things like that for the chapter headers. And they hired a man named Levante Sabo, who is a gorgeous artist, absolutely phenomenal artist. Levante Sabo, look him up sometime. But he does book covers and sort of posters and things like that. And he's done some really fine work. and he was hired to do the cover, and I think he did a phenomenal mock-up. Just his rough draft, which was clearly a very quick pass, was gorgeous. He did an amazing job on it. But then as we got a little bit closer, I'd been helping do some of the publicity things and did some bookmarks and things like that. And they said, well, wouldn't it be nice if you're able to do this digital art? So wouldn't it be nice if we had a cover that sort of matched the interior art? It'd be kind of a whole package. And would you be willing to do this? And I'm not good at saying no to things. And so about a week before school started, and I was meant to be doing prep, and I was often at a seminar when I got the email, I said, sure, of course I'll do that. And so took on a whole nother challenge and illustrated the first cover, and was lucky. In fact, the first cover was much too dark. If anybody has the advanced reader copy of that very first book, the blues just blended into each other because I was not used to illustrating for print. I was used to doing things for online. And so another artist was brought in addition to Levante, who had done this gorgeous sort of first version. Another artist named Gray Williams was brought in to sort of help with some of the color matching and just getting the settings adjusted to come out better for print. So a whole sort of, takes a village. A lot of different artists were involved in sort of that very first cover. But the line work was my own, and sort of the bulk of the effort was my own on that one. So I was very proud to be part of that first cover. And then the second and third, I've just had to sort of crank up the practice on my own, because those ones have been sort of just me, along with a little bit of the advice from some of the Algonquin Young Readers team, who have been fantastic. Their art direction team are great. So Carla Weiss and a couple other folks over there just really helping give ideas and then turn me loose on what I'm doing, and let me know, this is not working at all, and this line here is just not good. Let's create symmetry. So that's been nice, but it has been a little daunting to be the cover artist for my own work, and I don't want I loved the covers on the Jacoby series, and to this day get told that that's the reason people purchased it. So I don't want my art to be the reason somebody didn't purchase mine if it's not coming out well. But yeah, so sure, long answer to a short question. Yes, I've loved drawing for a very long time.
Nice. Just getting back through the comments here. Brian Journeyman is here. Juniman? Sorry, I never know how to pronounce your last name, Brian. Even though I've emailed with you for a long time. Mentioned that you're a Pacific Northwest Book Award winner. And Philip Clark, thank you. We are very much enjoying your books.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well, now we are getting up close to the 8 o'clock hour. Any last questions, or should we wrap it up? All right.
We've drawn to a close here. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. I really appreciate, coming out for joining me here. I really appreciate it. And yeah, again, I would love seeing more people supporting your local bookstores like Annie Bloom's. So ordering from there instead of the big A word would be super, super awesome. And even if not Annie's, at least go indie somewhere. But Annie Bloom's has the only signed copies of Oddmire that you can order directly right now. So grab those.
And there's that link right there.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again to everyone who showed up, and thanks, Will. It was a great event. I'm recording this event. It'll be up on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. So take a look for that so you can share it with other folks. Awesome. And good night, everyone.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Have a great night.